again. My name is Bethany Smith. I'm one of the dietitians here at the Health Services, and we're going to basically just do some very broad overviews of nutrition management. So as the nurse was talking about, the doctor was talking about, there's the medication aspects, and as the physiotherapist mentioned, there's the exercise part and the physical activity. And for nutrition, there's a lot of various things we're trying to balance. So weight control is one of the major goals. But even apart from weight control, we want to make sure that your glucose is well controlled, because that's the whole aim of diabetes management. So we're going to look at body mass index, calories, healthy eating, and there's a couple of different methods that we can use to create your diet and individualize it. And we all eat out, so we'll talk about healthy eating even when you're on the go. So in your folders, you had the chart there for your body mass index. So once you know your height and your weight, you can then determine where they meet up. And that number that you get on the chart is it's an index number. So if you're falling somewhere between 18.5 to 24.9, that's considered in the healthy weight, and that is the green part of the chart. So if you get a BMI in that range, in the green, you're healthy. If it's a little bit into the yellow, but it's between 25 and 26.9, it's what's considered kind of a buffer. So it is in the overweight, but your risk doesn't really go up as much until you reach body mass index of 27 and above. All right, I'll give you a minute just to look at where you fall. We look at, if you start from the vertical part of the chart, so look for your height in feet and inches. So let's say you're 5'2", and then you look at the horizontal axis, and you find your closest weight for your height, and then where the two of them meet up, then that's the body mass index. All right, so if you're 5'2" and 145 pounds, as an example, the body mass index is 26. So based on that number and the color coding, it's in the overweight, okay? But we did say that 26 was below 27, so it's not as serious until you get above 27. And again, this is a risk. This is a factor of risk. So it doesn't distinguish between muscle mass and body fat. It just looks at your total body weight. But as a general tool, it does help give us an idea of how healthy your weight is for your height. And it might give you somewhat of a goal if you know that it's a little bit on the high side. It gives you a goal of what you're aiming toward. Okay, so in order for us to maintain healthy body weights, or to get to a healthy body weight, we have to understand what calories are. And calories basically are energy. It's a unit of measure, and it is different for everybody. So based on your current weight, if you're at a higher weight, you actually need more calories to maintain that weight than if you're at a lower body weight. If you're older, generally as we age, we tend to need less calories than when we are younger and more active. And of course, if you're an active individual, you do a lot of physical activity or exercise, you're going to need more than if you're sedentary or sitting at a desk for most of the day. Unfortunately, men, just by virtue of having more muscle mass, will need more calories than women. Because women have less muscle mass. So women will always require usually less than men. So the other column there just gives you somewhat of an idea of how many calories that you require each day. So most women, some older adults, you're going to fall somewhere between 1,600 to 2,000 calories per day. And to be even more precise, there's a handout in your folder that gives you some calorie recommendations based on your gender, your age, and your activity level. So that is more of a specific guide, and this is more general, what I have on the screen. According to your handout, you'll see there are 3 levels of activity. Sedentary, which means you do less than 30 minutes a day. Moderately active means you're doing somewhere between 30 to 60 minutes of moderate physical activity in addition to your daily activity. And if you want to describe yourself as active, you have to be doing 60 minutes or more of physical activity a day. So once you find your appropriate age and, here it is, activity level, then you can have a more specific idea of your calorie requirements. And usually, thank you, usually this number refers to maintaining your body weight. So if you're looking to lose weight, then we would want to take off 200 or 300 calories off of this recommended calorie intake, because the one that they're telling you here is for weight maintenance, not necessarily for weight loss. All right, any questions so far on those 2 charts? Or are they pretty self-evident? Okay, well, we'll move on, and then if you do have questions, we'll come back to it. So based on your body mass index, if you determine that you want to reduce some weight because of the number that you got, you might remember yesterday that the doctor was saying even a modest weight loss, about 5 to 10% of your current weight, is going to give you some health benefits. And basically, the benefits that you're going to get is that your body becomes more sensitive to the insulin. So we were talking a lot yesterday about not being sensitive to the insulin. So even though you're producing it, the cells are not recognizing it, or they're not taking it up. So with some weight loss, the cells become less resistant. And so if you're trying to reduce 10% of your current body weight, let's say you're 200 pounds now, 10% of that is 20 pounds of weight loss. And if you're trying to reduce 5%, then it will be 10 pounds of weight loss. The other benefits are that you're going to reduce blood pressure and cholesterol levels as well. So you're going to get more than just diabetic health benefits. The other thing that we want to think about is if you're trying to lose a significant amount of weight, is that we might have to break it down into smaller goals. So 20 pounds might seem like a lot to have to achieve. So maybe we can break that down into 5 pounds at a time until you eventually then get to your long-term goal. And usually within 4 to 6 months, you should be able to see a 10% reduction of your weight. So if you give yourself that time frame, then that will help you to keep on target. The other target that you can use is 1 to 2 pounds per week. If you're averaging about that much, then you're losing weight at a recommended pace. You can go on any particular diet that's very intense, very strict, very limited, and you can get a faster weight loss. But usually those types of diets will cause you to lose weight, and then once you go back to regular eating, the weight comes back, and it's not helpful. So in terms of calorie requirements for weight loss, I was saying that when you're using your calorie chart, it's a weight maintenance. So if we're going to aim for weight loss, we have to get a deficit. And to lose about 1 pound a week, we have to be in a deficit of 500 calories a day. So that means you might want to cut down our intake by 250 calories, and we want to increase our output by 250 calories. So it's usually always best to have a combination of reduction of calorie intake by diet and an increase of calorie output by exercise. You can try to do all diet or all exercise, but usually you don't get as good of a result that way, and it's also much easier to burn out. So try to do a little bit from both. Okay, we had a little of a discussion yesterday as well about what is the best method of eating. And there's a few general principles that everybody would want to follow, and these are it. Even if you don't have diabetes, these are very useful for general weight control and good health. So eating regularly, that's usually always recommended, unless for whatever reason, for a temporary period of time, you have to skip meals. But most of the time, we don't advocate skipping, especially not earlier in the day, because generally we make up those calories at night. And by that time, your body is more likely to store those calories instead of burn the calories. So eating regularly, eating balanced meals. So when we only tend to eat all protein or all veg or all starch at one meal, that's not a balanced meal. We want to try to get a little bit from each food group. And we'll talk a little bit more about portions, because even if you don't change anything else, if you were simply to cut down your portion sizes, that would also be very beneficial, although food choices make a difference as well. Especially when you're on insulin or the diabetic medications that we talked about yesterday, it's important to have a little bit of starchy food, some type of a complex, high fiber starch at your meals. Otherwise, the medications are working and there's not enough glucose, and you might actually get low blood sugar by doing that. So when I talk about high fiber starchy foods, I have a list, so I'll go through that a little bit more. Of course, we know that we want to reduce added sugars and sugary drinks and sugary foods. It's not that you can't ever eat sugar again. Sugar is a carbohydrate such as starches. We get sugar in fruit, and that's naturally occurring. But I'm talking about excessive intakes of sugar. And normally we get excessive intakes when we're drinking things that are very high in sugar. So that includes juices, sodas, energy drinks, some of the shakes that we might get in the supermarket, like Suppligen. Those are very high in sugar. So we want to just bear in mind where we're getting our sources of sugar from. Even eating fruits in large quantities at one time. So a lot of times people will say, well, I can't just eat one mango, I have to eat a bucket at one time. So mangoes are good, mangoes are fruit, they're healthy, but when we have problems with our blood sugar, our blood glucose, all of that natural sugar, the body can't handle it. So we still have to be careful even when we're getting sugar from fruit. We also want to reduce fat intake, because that's very important to help us with our cholesterol. We talked that cholesterol tends to run along with diabetes, and it's good for weight control, because when we're taking too much fried foods, too much fatty foods, we also tend to gain weight. And high blood pressure is another issue that's common. And even if we don't have high blood pressure, most people in the general population are taking too much sodium anyway. So we all can do with a slight, reduction of sodium or salt intake. If you drink, that's another form of calories, plus it can affect, it can interact with your medications, and it can actually cause a dangerously low blood sugar. So we have to be careful with alcohol intake. Limited moderate intake is about 1 drink a day for women and 2 drinks a day for men, and certainly as many alcohol-free days as possible. Unfortunately, though, we can't save it up. So we can't save, 5 until Friday or Saturday. We have to, it just, per day, it's 1 drink or 2 drinks. And as we talked about, if being overweight is part of the picture, reducing even a moderate amount of weight will assist you with reducing your blood sugars or controlling them. So in order for us to have a balanced diet, or if you're attempting to go on any type of a diet or special plan, make sure that it doesn't cut out a whole group of food, because that's never going to be a realistic plan that you can have for a lifestyle. So foods from every group need to be consumed. So that means you need to have some starch, you need to have some fruits, some vegetables, some protein, some dairy, or non-dairy alternatives, and sparing amounts of fats and oils. So to get your full nutritional spectrum, you have to get from all of those foods. Eating a varied diet. So you might eat vegetables, but you might only eat lettuce. So that's good that you eat lettuce, but if you don't get the variety from other greens, from orange, from red, from yellow types of vegetables, you're not getting all of the spectrum of nutrition. So try to vary the choices within each category. And looking at, in each category, the types. So for instance, when we look at grain, since it's a small group, I can just pass it around. We're talking about whole grain. Now, I don't have all of the models as whole grain, but you'll see that bread, rice, the cereal is bran flakes, and the portions I'm passing around are symbolic of 1 portion of that food. So that's another helpful tip for portion control. There's a difference nutritionally between whole grain and refined white flour and white rice. With the whole grains, you're retaining the fiber that's naturally there, and you're also retaining the natural vitamins and minerals. Whereas when you get refined grains and flour, like the white flour, that part of the kernel has been removed, that part of the grain. So you no longer have the fiber, and they have to add back in synthetic vitamins and minerals. I'm telling you that's 1 portion, but we'll talk about how many in 1 meal, okay? So we'll come back to that very shortly, I promise. That's a half of a cup, okay? So as you're increasing your whole grains, and as you're eating more fruits and more vegetables, particularly vegetables, because we said too much fruit can work against you, and also legumes, so that includes peas and beans and lentils. These foods are high in fiber. They're low in fat, they have a lot of nutrition. On the flip side, we need to look at reducing our consumption of meats, particularly red meat, our consumption of fats and sweets, and then we want to look at the portions. So this is the more visual part. So when you are thinking of planning out your meal, this is particularly lunch and dinner, these things should be involved. Even if the dairy and the fruit are optional at the meal, you want to get at least what's on the main plate. And another tip is that if you're using a smaller size plate, like an 8-inch or a 10-inch, rather than a 12-inch, that will also help with some portion control. And the food will look more crowded, so your smaller portions won't seem as small. So basically, half of the plate should be your veggies, low carbohydrate, not what's called non-starchy vegetables. A quarter of the plate is going to be either the grains, such as the brown rice, the whole wheat bread or pasta, or in our local context, our ground provision. So you have green banana or sweet potato or pumpkin, that's going to go in 1/4 of the plate. And then the other quarter is your protein, and that is generally a lean protein, skinless poultry, fish, lean meats. If you're vegetarian, we would put there tofu or any type of meat analog that's made from soybean, and that would be your sorry? Yes. Yeah. So I know some people are vegetarian, so that's fine. You can still get your protein requirements met with soybean in particular and tofu, and nuts and seeds, and your whole grains. So those three things, a starch, a protein, and a vegetable should be at your main meals, lunch and dinner. If you're not having a dairy or a fruit at that meal, that allows you a larger portion of the starch, because the dairy carries carbohydrate, the fruit carries carbohydrate, and the grain carries carbohydrate. So if you're cutting out one, you can kind of allow yourself a little bit more of the other. So let's think about steps to creating your plate, because I could give you a meal plan and go home with it, with specific foods, but that's never going to work for everybody. There's not one size fits all. Everybody has different food preferences. Not everybody can afford the same things, and you don't always have access to the food that might be on your meal plan. So as long as you know the principles, you can create a recommended meal based on the principles. So first, get your plate. We said 8 to 10 inches, and then just create an imaginary line down the plate, and then on one side do another line across, so you've got 3 sections. In the largest section, fill that with the non-starchy vegetables. So here is your list. It pretty much incorporates all of your greens, broccoli, cauliflower, tomatoes, salad vegetables, stir-fry vegetables, pretty much everything except peas, corn, potato. That's going to fit on this non-starchy list. The good news about this is that there's quite a variety here. So even if you don't eat certain ones, you should be able to have enough other variety that you can keep it fairly interesting. And you can vary this. So you can eat it raw, you can eat it steamed, you can lightly stir fry, you can grill these vegetables. It doesn't have to be just a side of boiled broccoli, because you will get tired of that on a daily basis. So the more color, the more combinations that you can put together, the more interesting that your meals are going to be. The next step, after you've filled up the biggest part with the vegetables, is to fill one of the smaller sections with 1 to 2 portions of starchy food. So we just looked at the portions there. So each one that went around was 1 portion, and suggesting that you fill your plate with 1 or 2 portions. So, thank you. You can hold on to that. So as an example, this rice is a 1/2 cup. So that's going to be 1 portion. If you've got a full plate of veggies plus some protein, you may find that this half a cup of rice is enough. For someone who is exercising daily, who maybe a man might need a little bit more than this, but I would suggest maybe most women, probably this portion size would be enough for that meal, unless you're quite active. So that's one way of looking at it. If you were to have a sandwich at your meal, let's say you had a sandwich and a salad, each slice of bread is 1 serving. So your 2 slices of bread for the sandwich would be your 2 servings. So you still fit into the recommendation, 1 to 2 servings of high fiber, starchy food at that meal. And there's a few other examples there. So every half a cup of rice or pasta or beans is a serving. Every slice of bread is a serving. If you're having a pita bread, the round breads, each half of that is a serving. So 1 whole pita bread is 2 servings. Some people do like to eat crackers instead of bread. That can be somewhat of a downfall, because crackers, people feel like they're not really as starchy, they don't have as much flour, therefore they can eat more. But the reality is that they are made from flour, and they're not that filling. So we tend to eat more crackers, and we end up consuming just as much, if not more, than if we had just had a slice or 2 of bread. So when you're having crackers, about 5 small crackers, that's the size of a saltine cracker. 5 of them is considered 1 serving. The larger crisp breads, like the Ryvita type crackers, they're longer and thin, and they're in a rectangle. About 2 of them would be considered 1 serving. If you're having a potato, think about the size of a computer mouse, or think about the size of your fist. That's about the recommended size of 1 serving of potato or sweet potato. All right. So we talked about the portions there, and just to reiterate, what is a high fiber starchy food? So here it is, your whole grains, peas, beans, lentils. That is a starch and a protein. So for people who are vegetarian and they want to use beans as their protein, you also have to count it like a starch, because it's both. So that means that you'll have to cut back maybe on the rice or the potato if you're having beans at that meal. And our local ground provisions actually are good sources of fiber. So don't let anyone say that you can't eat yam or breadfruit or cassava. You can. The key is the portions, right? Our local West Indian style is to maybe fill up half the plate with rice and ground food and dumpling and whatever else. But just by changing the proportion, we can make a big change with our intake of starch and carbohydrate by changing it to this model. Yes. If you eat all 3 of them, they'd have to be pretty small slices, right? Because you're trying to limit that to about 1/4 of the plate. We don't want to pile it high either. So if you're going to have a lot of different starches at one meal, it means that each one has to be fairly small. So as an example, if you're having 2 green bananas, then that should be it. If you're having 1 green banana, 1 slice of yam, then that's 2 servings. If you're having 1 small dumpling, 1 slice of yam, then that's your 2. If you were to add a third or a fourth, then that's probably getting too much, right? And remember too, we're talking about eating frequently, so we don't necessarily, you don't have to fill up on lots of food at one meal because you're going to eat again in a few hours. Because that's another principle, is eating more frequently, but you're eating smaller amounts. That is more beneficial than eating big meals and then going for hours and not eating again, you know, for 5 and 6, 7 hours, right? So the best for diabetics in particular is smaller meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then probably a mid-morning snack and a mid-afternoon snack. So that keeps the hunger off, but it doesn't allow for these big meals that are heavy on the starch. Is that making sense, or?
Yes, it does, but you're telling me one thing and then I am hearing another thing from another person. So
Okay.
That's confusing.
Right. And what are you hearing from the other person?
I remember the doctor said, eat a heavy breakfast
Mm-hmm.
and do not snack between meals.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm having my breakfast like 8 o'clock. I said, I'm not breakfast. I have my breakfast at 8 o'clock and that must not be like the best meal of the day. I do not snack between those and 12 o'clock I have my breakfast. So when you're telling me, I have a breakfast of small portions during the course of the day.
Okay, when I mean by snack, I mean an apple, an orange, a banana, maybe some nuts, maybe those, you know, few crackers. So that's what I mean by a snack. So I'm not suggesting that you have more food again as far as plated food in between. But what he was saying was that you're eating about every 4 hours, because he said breakfast at 8, lunch at 12, and then I'm assuming dinner must be somewhere around 5. So I wouldn't really recommend going too much over 4 hours of not eating, especially when you're on medications and insulin, because then you run into the possibility of low blood sugar, and then you also feel like you have to eat a bit heavier at your meals when you know you're not going to eat again for a long time. And we're trying to cut down portions at the meal time. So if you're cutting down portions, it means you're probably eating more frequently, about every 3 to 4 hours, right? Now that's, to be fair to the doctor, that is one way of doing it. It's, again, I said, not one size for everybody. Some people simply, they're not in the habit of snacking, or they cannot get time away from their work to take a snack, and that's fine too. But I do notice that sometimes for people to feel like they can get satisfied because they know they're not going to eat again for a long time, they have to certainly eat a lot more starch to feel full. And that works against their diabetes, because all that starch, the body has to try to deal with that sugar that eventually gets digested into sugar and glucose, right? So, and by heavy breakfast, he may mean more of a balanced breakfast, because sometimes people might just have a slice of toast or a little bowl of cereal, and that's breakfast. Whereas if you were to have maybe some protein, like an egg or some sardines, your toast and a fruit and a cup of tea, that's a little bit more of a heavier breakfast than just, you know, a slice of toast and that's it. So, you know, there's also different definitions as to what is a heavy breakfast. Okay. The other last section of the plate was the protein, and as I mentioned, we are trying to focus on lean proteins. That's skinless poultry, various fish. White fish is certainly lean. So is oily fish. It has a bit more fat, but it is the heart healthy fat in terms of omega-3. So it actually helps to strengthen the blood vessels and helps to reduce the possibility of plaques building up in your blood vessels. So it does help with the cholesterol issues. So oily fish like sardines or mackerel or salmon or tuna, they're recommended about twice a week if possible. Other seafood, if there's shellfish like shrimp or lobster, we want to maybe just not get too heavy on those because they do have more cholesterol. But other ones, the mollusks like the mussels, the clams, the conch, those would have less cholesterol than things like shrimp. If you do eat beef or pork, it should be very lean cuts, and you can tell if it's lean because you can see the amount of streaking, the white streaks in between the layers. That's the fat. So if you see a lot of white streaks, that's not a lean piece. If it's mainly nice and red or pink, then that's a lean cut of meat. And if you're a vegetarian, you can go with things like tofu, eggs, particularly egg whites. There's no cholesterol in those, and low-fat cheeses. As part of that plate model, it allows you a portion of fruit and a portion of dairy, and that will round out the meal. If you're not really accustomed to taking dairy or non-dairy products, you can basically give yourself an extra serving of starch if you're not going to have the milk, because the milk and the non-dairy is another source of carbohydrate. If you don't want to drink milk, you can also use yogurt, and you can substitute yogurt, particularly the light one, which is the lower sugar, or the non-fat plain yogurt, which doesn't have any additional sugar. It's just got the natural milk sugar. So when we finish, and you've put everything there together, you've got your meal. And in this particular one, it's got a combination of salad and steamed vegetables. So at least this is colorful. It's got a variety of foods, and again, the portions are within the recommended amounts. So if you take out the fruit, if you take out the dairy, maybe you could give yourself a little bit more of the potato, or give yourself maybe a different starch along with the potato. So you do have a little bit of flexibility. If you don't eat one thing, you can add it to somewhere else. I don't want to get too much into this. I'm just putting it here just for your knowledge. I prefer to use more of this model because I think it's a lot more user-friendly. But people who are very much into numbers and counting, especially if they're taking insulin, there is another way of working out your diet, and it's called carbohydrate counting. Because carbohydrates are the nutrient in our diets that affect our blood glucose the most. So whenever we're dealing with blood glucose, it's our carbohydrate intake that's going to affect it. So generally speaking, when we're doing carbohydrate counting, we have to make sure that there's no more than 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrates in one meal, and there'll be 3 meals a day. And at snacks, it should actually be 15 to 30 grams of carbohydrate as a snack. The only how you're going to know how much carbohydrate is in something is you'll have to get lists, and the list will tell you how much carbs. So just for you to have in mind, where do we get carbohydrates? We get carbohydrates from starchy food. We get it from fruit and juice, from milk and dairy products like yogurt. We get it from peas and beans, the starchy vegetables, and we get it from sweets and sodas and juices, etc. So all of these various foods will provide carbohydrate. And once in the body, carbohydrate breaks down into glucose, and that's what gets into the bloodstream. So that is why these foods affect your blood glucose the most, and that's why we have to modify our intake. This is just a sampling, but it just goes to show you if you're carbohydrate counting, we usually use a unit of 15 grams of carbs as one serving, and these portion sizes will deliver 15 grams of carbs. You can even use jam or sugar or syrup, and each tablespoon is 15 grams of carbs. So we can work it into your meal plan, but it's a lot more of a comprehensive meal plan. So just to round this presentation off, when we're talking about healthy eating, we also want to incorporate the fact that we do eat out. So try to still stick to your meal plan, your plate model when you're eating out. Look at the choices, whether it's grilled or baked or steamed versus fried. Be careful with sauces and dressings. Usually they're high in fat, so you can always ask for it on the side or ask if they have a low-fat option. And even when you're out, try to go to places where you know that you're going to get served vegetables or where you can ask for vegetables. If you're having soups or soups or sauces, look for descriptions that tell you that it's tomato instead of cream, because the cream one will be much higher in fat. Even if you're going to fast food to get burgers and fries, you can still save yourself a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of extra fat if you get the regular size instead of the super size or the biggie size or the value size. Another helpful thing is bearing in mind that when you're eating out, the portions are usually double. So you can always plan to split it, so you have half for now and half for later, or you can share it. And you know, if you can try to plan ahead so that you're not dependent on eating out, that's really the best way to go about it. Because when you're eating out, it's much harder to stick to your meal plan. So just to summarize, most of all this information is going to be in your handouts, and it's just to know that your diet is an integral part of your diabetes management. And we start with what are your energy requirements, we start with a balanced diet, we go into portion control, and you know, it's an individualized plan. Not everybody is going to have the same eating plan, so we have to work with what works for you. And even when you're eating out, you can still be following your healthy eating plan. So don't think of this as a diabetic meal plan. Think of it more as healthy eating. And certainly, if you have families, everybody in the family can be eating the same way because it's good for everybody.